Good morning. I very much appreciate the time you've taken this morning to join us. I want to get started very quickly. We have a lot to cover within this 1 hour, but I've committed to you to finish within the hour. I want to be respectful of your time because I know you're each very busy. I do very much appreciate the fact that that you've joined us this morning. There's still individuals who are joining us, and that's to be expected. So let's just give it a few more seconds, and then we'll get into the heart of things. Okay, again, I want to be respectful of your time. So there may be others who are joining us as well as we continue, and that's okay too. Again, thank you for joining us for this hour. We're going to focus on the most recent point in time count that was released just a few weeks ago for San Diego. Then one of our team members, Paul D'Alessio, Director of Coordinated Services, will dive into the work that we are doing to address the specific urgent needs of our neighbors and the community. Our Chief Health Officer, Dr. Megan Parch, will review the criticality of behavioral health, including mental health challenges and harm reduction as it relates to substance use disorder. And in the last part of the call, I'll have an opportunity to answer your questions. Throughout the meeting, please feel free to type those questions utilizing the Q&A feature that you'll find on your screen. As I mentioned, most recently, the results of the point in time count were released in 2023. The point in time count is conducted in every major city on a yearly basis, typically at the end of January. On one night here in San Diego, about 1,500 volunteers canvassed the various regions in order to count those who are either on the streets, in tents, in RVs, or cars. It also includes the number of those who are in shelters. Of course, this number does not capture absolutely everyone who is homeless, yet it is an important tool that's utilized in order to be able to track how communities are doing from year to year. HUD also uses it to allocate funding for the various cities. With that, let me put things in perspective. There are almost 600,000 who are homeless in the United States, 40% of whom are unsheltered. In California, we have 1/3 of that total population at over 170,000, with 67% who are unsheltered. And then let's take it down to our local area. And here in San Diego, our most recent count is almost 10,300 individuals. It's the first time ever it's exceeded 10,000 mark, half of whom, about 5,200, are unsheltered. This reflects a 22% increase over last year. And last year's number was 10% higher than the prior count. 80% of those experiencing homelessness became homeless in San Diego. And I pick out that statistic especially because there's a thought on the part of some individuals that people come into the area. And of course, ours is a transient population, but for the most part, people who are experiencing homelessness in San Diego, 80% of them were here when they fell into homelessness. And that pretty much is consistent with other locations of the major cities as well. Very significant in this year's count is that there are more seniors as well as more women falling onto the streets. Thankfully, the number of families who are homeless has decreased. And yet last year's number reflected a 37% increase in families having fallen into homelessness. 2/3 of the total count on the city of San Diego. And in fact, right outside our doors, literally the doors of our village campus, reside about 2,100 individuals in encampments, the highest ever. These numbers serve as a stark reminder that we must implement more strategic solutions to end homelessness in our community. Now I'd like to have Paul D'Alessio, Director of our Coordinated Services, share with you our pillars of care that help address this growing number of individuals falling onto the streets. Paul?
Good morning. All of us here at Father Joe's see every day the people these numbers represent and the trauma, mental health barriers, substance use, physical harm, and developmental delays our clients are suffering from living on the streets, and the vicarious trauma this has on our staff. However, as staff here at Father Joe's, we are excited and honored to work at an agency that offers a holistic approach to ending this suffering. We recognize that our clients are unique in their strengths and challenges, And therefore, we are unique in offering a full array of services from street outreach, our Neil Good Day Center, emergency shelter through permanent housing. All of these augmented by support systems from our Career and Ed Center, our medical clinic, and our therapeutic childcare. 4 pillars that we have really seen work include: 1, meeting clients' basic needs. The humanitarian services that we offer at the day center and emergency shelters, showers, laundry, access to food, just being able to brush your teeth in the morning, eases the physical effects of the street. However, as people, we recognize these humanitarian services as essential, but as social workers, we don't see it as charity. As social workers, we use these services as an opportunity to bridge to life-changing services like case management to erase the burdens of the street with housing. Pillar 2, investing in children. Just this week, on Monday morning, while doing showers, a single mom came with her young son to check in for the wait list at our shelter. When speaking with them, and having a young son myself, I recognized the fear on the young boy's face, looking to his mom for comfort. I asked if they were temporarily staying with a friend, like many of our families do, and they said no, they were outside. Our residential team worked magic. They were already overworked for the day, but they worked magic and found rooms somewhere in the village to create an emergency stay for this family and provide basic comfort, shelter, food, and most importantly, safety, changing that boy's fear to hope. Number 3, making health a priority, which we provide to our neighbors outside, in our shelters, in permanent housing, and those who walk into our clinic. Dr. Parch is going to expand on this later, but from a case management perspective, last week, we had somebody that we were working with residential and case management in one of our emergency shelters, and he was preparing for work, but kept on being affected by a lot of pain. So working with doctors, he unfortunately found out that he had terminal cancer. His only hope was to go home to be with his brother and daughter before he passed. We were able, through flexible funds from the village, to get him a plane ticket to fly home, where he was able to go on a 4-hour road trip with his brother before he's going to spend his last few weeks with his daughter. He called us from his daughter's house, told us he was okay and enjoying his time with his family. And finally, strengthening self-sufficiency, which I think we do best here at the village. Seeing the spark of hope makes every social worker's day. We have weekly home clubs in our emergency shelters and starting them at our day center also, where we teach our clients about the current housing market. Many of them haven't had houses sometimes since the 80s and think, I'll just get a cheap apartment in Pacific Beach, not knowing that they're all Airbnbs now. So teaching the housing market, but also motivating towards what path will get housing most quickly. We were fortunate a couple of weeks ago to have our employment and education services accompany us in home club over at our Golden Hall shelter. They brought one of our CAP students who was training to be a chef and had actually already gotten a job while in training, working in a restaurant. He got up and talked about the classes in his chef's jacket with his gear, thermometers and all other things, and really instilled not only the educational benefits of working, but the hope that it created for him and the place that he had in society now when he showed up for work and was essential at what he did for the people that came into that restaurant. We had one of our clients that was sitting in the front row raise his hand and say, I only have one question. and our instructors were ready to talk about when the classes were happening and the curriculum. And he said, I only have one question. When can I start? That spark of hope made everybody's day that attended that session. And we were inundated with applications for our STEPS program after that. Through our holistic array of services, we're able to partner with our clients to give each person tools to move forward and improve their lives. Hope, then change. And now I'll turn it back over to Deacon Jim, who will talk about the importance of shelter and housing.
Paul, thank you very much for walking us through that, and the stories especially. You know, I shared at the beginning, I shared statistics with you, and heaven knows I have a lot more statistics I can share with you, and I won't. But at the end of the day, behind each and every single one of those numbers are individuals like the ones to whom Paul referred. And that's what it's all about. And the difference that is made in the lives of these individuals, one by one life at a time. And everyone is unique. It's not a matter of taking a cookie cutter approach. We assess situations because everyone's process out of homelessness actually is different. So it's a matter of being able to meet them where they are and apply the resources that they need to be in order to be most effective. So thank you, Paul, for that. You know, people are falling into homelessness faster than they are finding housing, unfortunately. Most recently, it was reported that for every 10 individuals helped into housing, 13 are becoming homeless. We can see the effects of this. More and more encampments are springing up around the city, and particularly in downtown and East Village areas, and as I mentioned, right outside our doors. The city has taken steps to try to address this issue. Last Tuesday, an ordinance was passed that specifically prohibits homeless encampments on public property, as well as within a 2-block radius of shelters, transit areas, and schools. Individuals who violate the ordinance may face citations or arrest. A strategy was presented by the city to add more shelter beds. Yet there are thousands on the streets, many more than will be accommodated in these additional shelters. Also, we need to have shelters that address the varied needs of those at different points in their journey out of homelessness. This includes non-congregate settings, sober living, harm reduction, spaces for seniors, people living with disabilities. They each have different needs. I've been speaking about non-congregate settings now for over 2 years, actually, and trying to convince certain politicians and also the public as well that we should have basically, I would call them parking lots, I guess, that the city owns, set aside in order to be able to provide spaces, and so pallet structures could be basically constructed there in order to take people off the street so that they don't have to live in unsanitary conditions, and we can start connecting them to services, which is what it's all about. It seems that soon we will have some version of that, if not pallet structures, but at least in areas where tents will be provided so that people don't have to be on the streets and achieve some of the services that are necessary. So we'll see. That's part of what I understand is the mayor's plan. We continue to advocate for this diversity of shelters to best meet the needs of the community we serve, to be most effective and impactful and most efficient in the use of funds. For example, based on feedback from those who lived experience, I should say, some neighbors in recovery require a completely sober shelter environment to thrive. Our family empowerment program is a sober living shelter for families. It is geared to help families achieve higher wages and employment. This leads to exits to permanent housing and long-term self-sufficiency. The program offers priority enrollment into on-site childcare and intensive case management focused on critical daily living skills such as budgeting. Coaching also promotes self-motivation and leadership. Another program we have is our St. Margaret of Katona Harbor. By offering a diverse range of shelter and housing solutions in the community, we empower our neighbors with options that meet them where they are in their journey. Young, new, and expected mothers are an especially vulnerable population. Among young women ages 18 to 24 who experience homelessness, 44% are pregnant or mothers. Many of the women we serve come from a history of abuse and trauma. The St. Margaret of Cortana Harbor program serves new mothers of children 6 months or younger, or expecting mothers between the ages of 18 to 24, as well as their children. Services available include on-site licensed therapeutic childcare, pre- and postnatal care, case management, nutritional education, housing navigation, and a private room at the Joan Kroc Center. These are just a couple of examples of our shelters that are made possible through generous philanthropy. Government funding is not available for these programs because they are not considered low barrier, yet they meet the needs of those we serve and prove effective in results. As I mentioned, these are just a couple of examples. We have transitional housing for families as well, and we help those families there throughout a period of time, typically a year or so, to be able to get on their feet so that then we can help them into housing. These are programs that are not funded by the city, again, because they're not considered low barrier, and yet they're very necessary and they make a difference in these lives of individuals. In fact, we have more than 1,000 shelter beds across our various programs. And shelters are a necessary stopgap to assist those impacted by homelessness in the immediacy and help them on a path to self-sufficiency. Shelters provide stabilization and supportive services to prepare individuals and families experiencing homelessness for the most appropriate housing solutions. That said, and some of you have heard me say this before, a shelter is not a home. In San Diego, the main cause of homelessness is the economics. It's expensive to live in this region. The average monthly rent is $2,700, and the rental vacancy is 3.5%. The less affordable housing available, the larger the homeless population. At this vacancy rate and this rent, this monthly rent, it's totally out of the reach of those who we serve. And so they fall onto the streets. The prior slide, you saw a young man with his little girl, that's Joseph and Abigail, and that was their move-in date for St. Teresa of Calcutta Villa. They are delightful, these two. He was a veteran, and he has sole custody of his child, of his little girl, Abigail. And he was someone who met some rough times because of different situations, fell initially into his car, actually, after he lost his apartment, and then onto the streets. And when I first met him, when he had been approved for St. Teresa of Calcutta, it just warmed my heart to hear him say, I'm now able to provide a place for my daughter. And as parents, especially, that's all we want. We want to be able to take care of our children. And he continues to prosper there, St. Teresa of Calcutta. Every time I see him, he has this warm smile on his face. And is just so thankful for the opportunity to be able to better his situation and the situation of his little girl. That's the reason we embarked on our Turning the Key initiative, in which we committed to introduce 2,000 affordable homes through a combination of the acquisition and refurbishment of motels and new construction. We currently have 500 units occupied by families, seniors, veterans, and those with disabilities. I mentioned St. Teresa of Calcutta Villa, that's 407. And then we have Benson Place. It's a motel that we acquired and we refurbished in the South Bay area, and that has 82 units. These homes include supportive services, ensuring hundreds of individuals and families have the resources they need to thrive. Until we have enough affordable housing, the ultimate solutions, which is the ultimate solution to homelessness, our neighbors in need will continue to live in inhumane conditions on the streets, on the bridges, and in canyons. St. Teresa of Calcutta is the model. Here, people have a permanent home by services and a welcoming community. The studios and 1- and 2-bedroom apartments are designed with dignity, including simple but tasteful cabinetry and counters, kitchens, and private bathrooms. Services include support through resident engagement activities and life skills classes, both of which contribute to residents' housing, stability, and quality of life. In fact, the wraparound support is why 96% retain their housing long-term. St. Teresa of Calcutta is home to over 40 families, more than 270 seniors, and 74 veterans. We continue to advance this model in our upcoming Turning the Key communities. In fact, we recently announced 2 new developments, one community located at the intersection of 17th Street and Commercial Street, and another at 16th Street and Island. Each one will have over 100 studio and one-bedroom homes. The latter part of 2024, we look to break ground on each development with ribbon cutting in the early part of 2026. It is imperative that municipalities streamline the permitting and entitlement, as well as public funding processes for more affordable housing to be developed, less costly and more timely. In the prior slide, you saw a map actually of where affordable housing is located. So right now we have a total, without counting these two new constructions, total of 900. With them, it'll be over 1,000. And within this number is the St. Teresa of Calcutta Villa and Benson Place that I mentioned previously. The end of it all, we'll have well over the 2,000 mark with God's help. But slowly but surely, it's very onerous to build housing here in San Diego, but it is imperative because at the end of the day, that's what breaks the cycle of homelessness. Shelters can do just so more, though they are critical within the equation as well. We are saddened by the current reality on the streets, but we are more motivated than ever to create change. Once someone falls onto the streets, they likely experience trauma and may turn to dangerous substances readily available to those vulnerable neighbors. Along with the lack of enough affordable housing, behavioral health and substance use disorder is another increasing trend we see amongst those we serve. In 2019, there were 165 deaths of people on the streets. In 2020, that number has risen to a devastating 574, more than a third of whom died from fentanyl-related causes. People are dying on the streets. We cannot support a person's recovery or journey out of homelessness if they die before we have a chance to provide care. This brings us to our final topic, and it's my pleasure to introduce our Chief Health Officer, Dr. Megan Parch. Dr. Parch.
Thank you so much, Deacon Jim. It's an honor to be here with all of you and speaking this morning on a topic that is near and dear to my heart. My Father Joe's Village's family members know that this is my day job. I'm excited to support our health center team during my days, and in the evenings, I actually work at San Diego City College teaching in the alcohol and other drug studies department there. So I am relatively well versed in substance use disorders, and my background and PhD is in counseling. So mental health, substance use disorders, and broadly behavioral health is what really fueled my passion to be here with Father Joe's Village's team. So I'm going to be talking with you a little bit about the experience of mental health diagnoses, substance use disorders, and also some of the needs for harm reduction efforts within our community, some that are underway in real time and some that will be growing in the weeks and months ahead. So I do know that these are topics that folks may find themselves having a lot of questions about. Please do consider using that function of submitting questions, and we'll happily answer as many as we are able within our discussion here today, and certainly afterwards too, if there are more questions than what we can get to. We do want to be able to provide support and education and engage in these discussions that are so necessary in our community, given what we're experiencing right now. So research tells us that 20% to 25% of individuals who are experiencing homelessness also suffer from some form of mental health diagnosis. And that is something I think anecdotally many of us see in the community each and every day. If you are driving downtown, if you are anywhere near encampments or witnessing individuals who are actively experiencing homelessness, living on our streets, in parks and in canyons, you are witness to substance use and mental health diagnoses. And so that's readily apparent to us. I think that the statistics are underreported, in fact, because mental health and substance use disorders are so stigmatized in our community that individuals are unlikely to want to report signs and symptoms, and oftentimes are hesitant to engage in a solution and getting help. We know that individuals who have mental health diagnoses, whether they are acute or chronic, short or long-term, those are some of the things that need to be treated on a very unique and personalized and patient-centered basis. While Individual counseling or group counseling may work for one, medications towards stabilization may be needed for another. And so we employ a number of different modalities here within the Village Health Center at Father Joe's Villages to assure that we are, as stated before, meeting people where they're at and providing a variety of services to help them reach their goals and stabilization. Ultimately, as community members and as humans, fallible humans ourselves, we know that the experience of mental health diagnoses, whether that be anxiety, depression, all the way up to what we call severe mental illness, SMI, experiences like schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, and so forth. Some of those that are a little bit harder to treat and longer term and chronic ailments. Many of these things keep us from engaging in the community, engaging with our families, being able to care for ourselves through activities of daily living like hygiene, purchasing groceries for our home, participating in work regularly. And so mental health diagnoses are a significant barrier for our neighbors experiencing homelessness. They keep them from being able to obtain and maintain employment. And ultimately, that impacts finances and housing, as Deacon was referring to earlier. So the experience of mental illness in our community is very apparent and continuing to grow and a necessary place for us to continue to invest in our efforts. As we move on to our next slide, I do want to speak a little bit about substance use disorders as well. So unfortunately, we're seeing a very significant uptick in the use of fentanyl within our community. I know that many of us who are watching the news and are reading newspapers and just, are discussing with our family members and friends what's being seen within what's deemed an opioid crisis. We are fearful about the way that fentanyl and other substances are impacting our community members. So the increased presence of substance is a really critical challenge that our health center team, our outreach teams at Father Joe's Villages and the Health Center Street Health Program are encountering and working to address each day. For those who do not know, fentanyl is a very powerful opioid, and it's roughly 50 to 100 times stronger than heroin. When we use substances like opiates, they end up suppressing our systems in such a way that they tell us, calm down, turn that down, slow that down. And inevitably that ends up slowing individuals' heart rates and breathing until they go into a space of arrest and they are no longer with us. So we are seeing that individuals either knowingly or unknowingly are using fentanyl in the substances that they use each and every day. And unfortunately, for many individuals, that's leading to an experience of overdose, and for many, premature overdose-related death. We know that fentanyl is highly addictive and very deadly, and unfortunately, it's being laced with a number of different, or combined, we might say, with a number of different substances in our community. Individuals at our day center, those who are served by our street health team, our clients are telling us, I thought I was smoking marijuana. I thought I was using cocaine. Many times what one individual believes that they're using is not, in fact, what they are ending up introducing to their system. And unfortunately, as with any substance, we say in our substance use disorder courses, the brain is hijacked. When we introduce substances that our body is not meant to be utilizing, our brain begins to respond differently. We've created new pathways. And we are, in essence, connected now in many circumstances to those substances that we're using. They can be highly addictive. And as we're mentioning as well, fentanyl and other opioids can be extremely deadly. So the experience of changes in brain chemistry, physical dependency, and so forth lead individuals in our community to extreme sickness and in many circumstances, death, to the point where many individuals in our community are electing to use so that they aren't in withdrawal, but they also don't want to use to a point of death. And so they're really caught in a scary limbo here without the resources to be able to use in a smarter way. One of the things that we need to be considering right now is that the opioid crisis and fentanyl impacts all of us. From a public health perspective, we're looking at the health of all, right? We're looking at each of us who is witness to the suffering and trauma, as Paul was referencing earlier, as well as the trauma that's being experienced by our community members. Collectively, this is an issue that we need to address. And as a society, we've never had to confront a substance use crisis to this particular magnitude before. So truly, this is a call to action, and we need to respond in this moment with new solutions that are potentially ones we haven't thought of or invested in before. What we're finding is that the old ways of providing access to treatment, encouraging treatment services, and so forth, really are not working in this new world that we're in, and that people are dying. And what we first need to do is mitigate risk and lower the risk of death. So the solution proposed here is harm reduction. So in order for us to address not only the staggering death rate, but also to help liaise people into necessary treatment, to reduce substance use, to improve individual stabilization, we have to invest in new approaches like harm reduction. So what is it? It's a term that is kind of buzzy. It's one that we're hearing, but what does that truly mean, and how is Father Joe's Villages planning to enact this? So harm reduction as a term is generally misunderstood. It's not about enabling drug use. It's not about allowing people to use over and over or allowing them to increase their use. Truly, harm reduction at its core is about respecting the rights of individuals in our community who use substances, individuals who have the same rights as any one of us here today, and assuring that those individuals stay alive with the hope that through living another day, they can make additional choices. They can make new and better choices. So not about enabling drug use, it's really about keeping people connected and keeping them alive so that they can receive the care and treatment that are needed to allow them to stabilize. Harm reduction is very much fitting with Father Joe's Villages creed: compassion, respect, empathy, empowerment, and dignity, because it is compassionate at its core. It is allowing people one more day to make choices that may be different from the day before. And I think as a human, and relating back to the human experience, every one of us thinks of things that we can, or maybe even should, change in our lives: being more adherent to our medications, eating healthier, exercising, and just how difficult some of these simple changes might be. That's part of the human experience. It's really hard for us to think about change in a short or long-term capacity. And it's the same for our neighbors who have less support and resources than us, if not exponentially harder for these individuals. Harm reduction is an entry point that helps people receive support on a path to a better life. And we already invest in a number of different harm reduction principles here at Father Joe's Villages, such as medication-assisted treatment for individuals with opioid use disorder and alcohol use disorder. Medication-assisted treatment helps individuals to begin to reduce and hopefully wean off of the use of substances, and is an evidence-based approach to help people in their path towards hopefully stabilization and recovery and cessation of substances on the whole. Though not for all people, not all individuals will end up completely ceasing substances. That is the goal, is to continue those conversations towards getting somebody into a state of recovery or stabilization, whatever that looks like for them. This is helping individuals who are physically dependent on drugs to be able to move towards a point where they're able to engage with their families and with our community in a way that wouldn't have been possible before while they were under the influence. I also want to tell you a bit about naloxone. Naloxone is a really important component of our harm reduction efforts presently. So within our current methods of reducing harm to our community members, we are dispensing, we are prescribing within the health center, but then also distributing naloxone, which is an opioid overdose response medication, into the hands of our community members, providing a lot of education and support about how to use this substance in order to prevent premature death for individuals in our community. And I can say, just this morning as I was driving in, I saw the corner of a street that was taped off with police tape. And there was an individual under a sheet on the ground. And unfortunately, that is becoming more and more present in my world working here on our downtown campus. I'm seeing this and I'm witness to this more and more frequently, which tells me that there is still a lot more work to do here. And we're committed to assuring that we get this life-saving resource in people's hands. So through new partnerships with the County of San Diego, we've received a very large shipment of naloxone. Our outreach, street health, and other teams are working to distribute naloxone. We're also partnering with our law enforcement partners. They have a program called Law Enforcement Naloxone Leave Behind program that was started at the beginning of this year through the sheriff and SD chief of police. And that's really critical to assure that law enforcement and other community-based organizations and nonprofits like ourselves are focused on a similar mission of getting resources into people's hands, connecting with them in a way that's non-judgmental and caring, so that we can entice them into treatment with us, as we are trusted partners and entities in the community. When they are ready to make a change, when they want to make a change, they will come to us first, because we've established that relationship of rapport. So trust is what allows our community members to know that we care about their health and we care about their safety, and that we are the folks who can serve them moving forward in the future with more holistic care services. Maybe today it is a meal in our lunch line. Hopefully tomorrow it's engagement in medication-assisted treatment, getting on a housing wait list, and moving towards bigger and better goals for these individuals. We are going to be receiving a naloxone vending machine from the county at the end of this month. So you see a visual here. This is going to be located on our downtown campus. This is exciting because it is the first county-funded naloxone vending machine that is focused on our population, our target population, individuals and families who are experiencing homelessness. While there are a number of other county-funded naloxone vending machines that are at treatment centers and on tribal lands within our county, this is the first one that focuses on our target population. So this is an exciting step forward. We're very, very excited about the installation of this, and we hope to share more with you on that soon. At the end of the day, naloxone is just one of many harm reduction efforts that engages people in continued discussions about care and services and using smarter with less consequences, which is not only better for that individual and their family, but also for all of us in the community on the whole. And that's truly what harm reduction is about. It is about reducing harm for that individual and all of us surrounding that individual, acknowledging that there's a ripple effect in our communities when individuals are using substances in a manner that spreads disease. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Deacon Jim to round things out for us.
Dr. Parch, thank you so very much. That's wanted you to spend a fair amount of time on this aspect, because it's becoming more and more imperative that we meet people where they are and save their lives at the end of the day. So that's why I thank you for walking us through harm reduction, and we'll be sharing additional information as we move forward, as we continue trying to help individuals. The harm reduction practice helps neighbors minimize their negative health, social, and legal impacts and caused by the substance use disorder, moving them closer to recovery, even if they're not ready to completely stop use at the present time. As Dr. Parch mentioned, every harm reduction encounter is an opportunity for our team members to build trust and potentially move someone further along the path of recovery. Once trust is forged and those we serve have a safe, stable place to live, we can better uplift them with our diversity of wraparound services, including medical care, counseling, and other programs to support a healthy and productive life path. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Dr. Parch, for your presentations and for sharing. What I want to do now is thank you each, before I open it up to questions, for the support that you give us to make our work possible. I appreciate each of you on this call who is part of the solution. You give of your time, your compassion, and your energy to make a difference. And we continue to adapt to the situation and meet the moment so that together we can end homelessness. So with that, let's open up. Let me just look at the questions that we've received here and answer some of these questions for you. One that's come in that's very easy to answer is one person has asked whether we can make the slides and the recording available. And the answer is yes. So to every individual who's on this call, we'll make sure that we get that to you, and you can feel free then to share it with your friends. And if you have additional questions as a result of really reflecting on what we've said today, feel free to let us know. So there's a question here. Doesn't harm reduction mean helping people to do drugs? That's an excellent question. We get that question a lot. I know I have answers to this, but let me turn it to Dr. Parch. Dr. Parch, what's your reaction to that?
A question that we hear very frequently, and it's a great question. I think at its core, there's a lot of concern, right? As community members, we're coming from a space of care and concern. What is the best direction forward? How do we help the most people without the research base to tell us what is the one solution? There is no one size fits all solution. So harm reduction really is not about enabling drug use. As I mentioned prior, it's about helping people to stay alive, to assure that they can receive that needed care and treatment another day. And harm reduction is a compassionate way of engaging people where they're at and giving them another day's time to make choices to receive care. One of the ways that our team members connect with individuals in our community from a space of harm reduction, we say to them, and this might be a real conversation in the way that it's phrased, is, okay, so you're using substances and that's the reality for you today. How can we help you to stay safe? How can we help you to be healthy? How can we keep you alive? Right? What are the things that are needed for you right now in this moment? How can we help you to use smarter? How can we help you to reduce the consequences of your use? Those are harm reduction conversations. That's the way that it sounds when we're engaging with community members in this really judgment-free and also honest space. So that's what harm reduction looks for us. If individuals are dying from drug use, we can't offer them the support and resources needed for them to engage in recovery and to experience health and to really thrive in our communities in the way that we'd like for them to do. So the immediate goal for us right now is to focus on individuals, their health, their well-being, their opportunities for improved health at a point when individuals are ready. And again, that really is this really demanding moment of we gotta keep people alive. What is it that we need to do today to keep people alive, to engage them with us in those conversations? And that's where we are right now, given the lethality of the substances that are in our community.
That's right. You mentioned as you were coming into the clinic today, to the health center, you mentioned that you saw someone and there was a sheet draped over that person. So that person is beyond help at this point, right? And how sad is that? And so that's what harm reduction is all about, trying to keep individuals alive so that we can help them in the longer term with medication-assisted treatment that Dr. Parch mentioned. It's recognizing that the brain chemistry of these individuals has been changed by their substance use disorder, totally changed. They are in a place where they can't make the decision right off the bat to just quit and go sober. It's not possible because of the impact of these drugs on their brains. And so, what can we do to help them in order to get to that point so that they can then truly live? I was asked, one of the questions that was asked here is, have we administered naloxone very much? And the answer is yes. Year to date, and we're not even through half the year, we've administered it to over 100 individuals. Think about that. I mean, and that's just us. And that's not, that's not including other providers that are out there doing good work, and doesn't include even individuals themselves who, when you give them naloxone, they see their friends overdosing and they administer it there in those cases as well, which is why these vending machines are so critical. And so anyway, thank you, Dr. Parch, for that answer. In fact, I'll stay with you because there's a question here as to individuals who are experiencing an overdose. What are the signs of that?
Great question. So we can tell when individuals are experiencing overdose because their extremities begin to turn purpley blue. In a lot of circumstances, we're seeing that the body is beginning to shut down. Blood is not being pumped to the extremities. And so oftentimes you'll see fingertips, lips, and so forth are beginning to change in color. Eyes may be rolled back. You may hear the body's last attempts at breath. So wheezing or gurgling noises are often found, but you'll find that the system is so depressed that the individual is unresponsive. They are not breathing. They are not moving. They cannot be tapped. Hey, can you hear me? Any of those sorts of things. So when we come across somebody that we believe is in a state of opioid-induced overdose, commonly we want to assess the scene and make sure that we believe that we are safe. We might call out. A lot of times we encourage our team, if they feel that the setting is safe, to use a sternum rub, where you would use your your knuckles here and rub on somebody's sternum, that's usually uncomfortable enough to rouse somebody who might be intoxicated or under the influence of other substances, who might be here with us, but they're resting. When those interventions fail and we find that the individual continues to be unresponsive, not only are we calling 911, but we are administering naloxone, because the beauty of this as a substance is that it binds with the receptors that are impacted by opioids only. It does not have any other impacts. And so as Good Samaritans, we're able to deploy this medication that could have no other negative impact aside from assisting someone who may be in a state of opioid related overdose. So there are no possible physical consequences to using this, with the exception of if an individual comes back, they may go into withdrawal, which can be really uncomfortable, certainly. And so again, if you find somebody who's unresponsive in the community, you can attempt interventions to engage them, sternum rub, you can attempt naloxone, but it's always really important that we're calling 911 as our first effort to assure that we have additional backup on the way. What we find, and I know as Deacon had referenced, in the use of naloxone on our campus, it's taking 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or more doses, because the potency of fentanyl, as we mentioned, is so strong, so much stronger than your standard opioids. And so it's really important to assure that you have help, that you have backup on the way, because many times it takes continued medical intervention to be able to bring people back.
Thank you. And this is a topic that's a difficult one for individuals and misunderstood. As we've said before, we just recently had a conversation, separate conversations with 2 local politicians. I won't mention their names, but 2 local politicians, and they heard me speak about harm reduction, and I was having a personal conversation with each of them, and no one else around, and they looked at me at the end and they said, you know, Deacon, you're making a lot of sense. And I want to learn more because I don't fully understand yet. And I appreciated their honesty, actually, you know, that they're struggling. I mean, and it is a struggle. It's a struggle, of course. But I appreciated their honesty, number one, in the time that they gave me to share my thoughts on harm reduction. And so this is, you know, we need to work on this, and we need to move on this and see how we progress for the good of those who we serve at the end of the day. So I'm going to switch gears here on another question that was asked that has to do with housing first. It's a great question as well, because this question says, I've heard a big push against housing first. Similarly, I've also heard, by the way, that there's a big push for housing first, right? So housing first has been controversial now for, I would say, probably 20 years. And a lot of it is because there is a misunderstanding, I believe. For the housing, for those of you, let me just explain housing first. So housing first, it is an evidence-based philosophy and approach that housing is a basic human right. And absolutely, I agree with that. We agree with that. How can you not agree with that, right? Housing is a basic human right. And so the thought is that you place someone in housing and then you provide the resources that they need to stabilize, right? Whether and they can opt for those resources or not. So the housing purists, I would say that, you know, regardless of whether the person opts for those resources or not, you place them into housing. We at Father Joe's Villages, as I've explained even in this presentation, you see what we do. We have a focus on shelter because there's a need for that. We have a focus on housing, obviously, because that breaks the cycle of homelessness. But what you've heard me say, the common thread throughout are the wraparound services that make a difference. That's what helps individuals through their shelter experience, and also helps them to retain their housing. And that's our approach. I never get involved in the housing first tagline, in a sense. I don't label it a housing first. We just work on what we know because of our past experience works. And that's shelter, that's housing, but most importantly, the wraparound services. So I hope that answers the question, at least to a certain extent, but it is a controversial question there. A question was asked, I mentioned the encampment ordinance that was passed last week, and how will that impact Father Joe's Villages? That's a good question as well, as far as our services are concerned. The ordinance calls for actually the encampments right outside our village campus to be cleared at some point. And so we've made connections, especially Dr. Parch and her team through the street health effort, as well as Paul DeLesso and his team, as far as their outreach teams are concerned. They've made connections with people on the streets. They've developed relationships. They know what these individuals are. And as a result, they've started helping them in one respect or another. So when people move, you lose that contact. And so that's problematic, because then, those relationships that we started building and the support that we've been giving them is going to be broken potentially. And so that is of concern to us, obviously. So we're in the midst of it all. That's a focus of ours. How do we continue to make the context that we'll keep the context that we've had? So that's an aspect of it. I will say that for us, and I've made this very clear, it can't just be a matter of moving individuals for no positive end. And by that, I mean, we need to have places for them, whether it's an apartment or it's a shelter, but we need to have places for them, because if we're just moving them from one area to another, then in essence, what have we done? Either for them or for the community as a whole, right? These encampments are not healthy for those who reside therein. They're unsanitary, right? There are communicable diseases that can be passed. We know Hep A has reared its head to some extent, right? And so it's not good for them. It's also not good for the businesses in the area. It's not good for the residents who live in the area either. So it's not good all around. So obviously these encampments, we must do something. And yet what we do is what's paramount, right? Again, it's not just a matter of moving people. How do we help them in order to better their situation so that the community as a whole becomes healthier? Right? So these are all good questions, and I think we've ended the questions at this point. Let me make sure. I think that's the case. But I want, we've talked about a lot today, and I really do appreciate you joining me. I hope I've made it a point to cover some important pieces here, like the point-in-time count and the services that we provide, and especially behavioral health, because that impacts so many people who we serve who are on the streets and in our shelters. But I want to leave you with two things. First of all, I want to leave you, we'll go to our last slide here. I want to leave you with some good news. And in the midst of some challenges, actually, a couple of months ago, almost 3 months ago, I think at this point, we had an extremely critical or devastating flood, actually, in our health center. It pretty much destroyed the entire health center. Unfortunately, these big, gigantic pipes broke within a wall, and it was on a Sunday. No one was there. And after water had poured into the health center for about 20 minutes, it really had demolished the health center. I'm always seeing that silver lining and God at work, even in the midst of challenges. So we took the opportunity to totally revamp that health center and build it better, actually, so that we can better serve our community, those who come to us, those who reside either with us or who are on the streets. And so we will be reopening that. We'll have a grand reopening in July. In the meanwhile, by the way, I don't want to give you the impression that Dr. Parch and her team stopped seeing patients. That's not the case. I have such a passionate team. Literally within 24 hours of the incident, they were on the second level of that building, and they had made a makeshift examination rooms and an intake center and so forth, and they kept on with their work. Obviously, it hasn't been ideal, but the team is just incredible. I'm so very proud of them. And so now, though, they'll be able to come back down into the new digs, in a sense, and it'll be better all around. So that's one. And then in September, also, we're opening up our employment and education services. We're cutting the ribbon on that. It's a new area. It's expanded, new state-of-the-art and technology will be able to help even more individuals. It was Paul who gave an example of how that area and the STEPS program, the vocations training program, I call it, right, helps individuals. He gave an example of that. So very, very critical. We'll also have frontage so that we'll be more visible to the community on the streets, and we can serve them better as well. And hopefully we can bring people in who are on the streets. So that's one as well. October, we have a podcast series that we're beginning, and we'll notify you about that and invite you to that. And also tours on a monthly basis. We have tours. Please, I invite you to come and see the work that we do if you haven't, and especially be our ambassadors out there. We love giving tours. Invite them to the tour so you can contact us about that. We have contact information. Most importantly, I want to leave you on a positive note. All right, and I say that because we talked about a lot of challenges, and it can bring us down, right? But just so that you know, and I'm asked quite often whether I get overwhelmed. at the whole process and whether I just want to throw up my arms. And I'm always struck by that question because I don't. Our services are so needed, and we are making such a difference in the lives of individuals. That's what drives me. I know that's what drives my team, right? I mentioned Joseph and Abigail. Paul mentioned some individuals. I mean, Dr. Parch has so many people with whom she interacts in her team as well. We are the Michelles of the world, and Dave's and Rochelle, and there's so many. And those are the ones who keep me going, because I know if not for us, they would not be in this better place where they are now. And there's so many of others. Do we have in the midst of it all, is everyone a success? No, everyone is not a success, all right? And we know that. But what drives us is the fact that we do make a difference in the lives of individuals, and there are so many successes, and we see it, and I'm so proud of each and every single one of them. So I want to leave you on that positive note. And again, we're able to do the work we do because of the support of you on the call that you give us. You're our ambassadors out there. And so I very much appreciate each and every single one of you. Thank you again for joining us this morning. God bless you.